Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series on the MiSter FPGA DE10 Nano board project. And today we have the longest video I've made on MiSter so far. It is a viewer request and new core Sega Saturn testing video, and that is because SRG320 has updated the core multiple times in the last 48 hours, and I've put two videos together into one gigantic extravaganza. There's going to be a lot of information, a lot of details on the core, and a lot of fun, so definitely watch the whole thing, but let's get right into it. First of all, Doom is now running on the Sega Saturn core, and if you know the joke, but does it run Doom? We couldn't say that about the Saturn core for a while, but now you will see Doom is running, and it is running about as fast as Doom on the Sega Saturn does run, which is not to say great, but that is not the core's fault, that is just how this game was ported over. But obviously back in the day, absolutely every piece of hardware had to run Doom, and the fact that it's working on MiSter with the Sega Saturn core is awesome, because this was a game that didn't work for a while. You'll see that everything looks exactly like Doom should. I won't say it sounds like Doom should though, because this game does not have any audio as of yet. Now that may change with future core updates. Obviously audio is going to be a very big component of the Saturn core, but right now you can 100% play Doom on your MiSter, and it actually does get from level to level. I find with some games that are working, you can beat the first level of the game, but sometimes when it loads between the first and second levels, it'll freeze, and you totally can frag yourself as well. But speaking of awesome first-person shooters, Hexen also works on this core right now, and it is one of the best new experiences I had with the Saturn core on MiSter, because this game is running at what feels to be full speed for the Saturn. The audio sounds excellent, there's no crackling going on. This is just a great example of the current status of the core in some games, because it just kind of feels like playing a Sega Saturn. I can't really tell much of a difference except the fact that I don't have a Saturn controller in my hand, I'm using a different controller, and my MiSter's on the ground in front of me when I play. But this is a perfect example of the progress that is being made, because this game didn't used to work whatsoever, and a lot of people in the comments asked me to test Hexen, so here you go, it totally works. Would I start playing it on the MiSter? Probably not, because if it starts to freeze, you're not going to get progress, and let me tell you, this game is like a maze. Now another game that I tested earlier and I found that froze in the first level was Power Slave, or Exhumed if you're in European territories. It's another awesome first-person shooter. It's one of the best on the Saturn, and not only now is it feeling like it's running faster with a better frame rate, but in the original testing video, when I opened up this tomb and the cutscene played, the game would freeze here immediately. Now it does not freeze, it continues to play. You get this full audio over the cutscene in engine, and you can 100% go to the next level in the game. I got to level 4 on the core. It did not freeze, I just had to move on and start capturing other things. But this is evidence that the core is progressing in a lot of good directions, because before you could play about 45 seconds of Power Slave, now you can play like half an hour or longer depending on how far you get into it, and it seems to be really stable. This is an excellent example of what's going on with the core. SRG320 has made a lot of updates, and so many of them are making games either work for the first time or work much better than they did when we first encountered them. And so many things are just functioning better. Taking a look at Mega Man 8 here, another game that you guys requested in the comments that I test, and this video is a combination of your viewer requests and what I wanted to look at and talk about. This works perfectly. If this is not running on a real Sega Saturn, I would absolutely have zero idea, and some of the best new features of these core updates, and SRG320 updated it like 3 times in 24 hours, is the audio is so much better than it was before. So go ahead and listen to Mega Man 8 for like 35-45 seconds and listen to the clarity in the audio. You're not going to hear those cracks and pops and sometimes whistles that we did on previous cores, so keep your ears open and I'll be right back. That just sounds exactly like Mega Man 8 on the Sega Saturn should, and that is one of the biggest results of these new core updates, is that the audio in a lot of spots is still amazing. Same thing when we were talking about X4, that also has excellent audio, and it seems like the Mega Man games are some of the best things you can currently play on the most updated MiSter core, because they just seem to work. Now, on things that are apparently working for some but not for others, and there is some weird results where some people will get games to load that other people won't. Virtual Fighter 2 still freezes for me on the loading please wait menu, but there's other 3D fighting games on the Sega Saturn that you can 100% currently play on this core, and that's what it's like to test these things. And if you want to get involved in the testing, I highly recommend it. Join the MiSter Discord, because the more things we know work or don't work, the more things we can test in the future. When a new core comes out, a new update from SRG320, we can go back and look at that spreadsheet of games that are marked as non-working, and we can see if we can get them to boot or get further into them. So it's definitely something you should play around with and help us out. The more eyes, the better. But on another game that just seems to work perfectly great, it is Galaxy Fight. This is kind of like Waku Waku 7, just slightly different, but it is a very fun, awesome 2D versus fighting game, and this is playing exactly like I would expect it to. This was a game I wanted to test out because I do love it, and a few people had requested it. If you want to see a particular game tested next video, leave me a comment down below and tell me. I try to test everything you guys ask for, and this just feels like a fluid fighting game. The inputs are going in as I would expect them to. The visuals look awesome. That zooming effect is working perfectly fine. And again, another great example of the audio being perfect. Go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back again.
Round 3, fight!
I just can't stress enough how good the updated core is with audio. It used to be that the audio would come through, but it would be scratchy, and you'd have to turn it down because some of the tones that would come through would just absolutely abuse your ears. Now that is not happening near as much. You still may encounter it, and I definitely recommend you don't wear headphones when you're testing the Sega Saturn core, because you never know when it's going to happen. But things are just feeling like a real Sega Saturn. Princess Korura Daisuken here, I think I pronounced that right, it's not an easy name, is just running. It sounds great, it looks great, and I was able to beat this game on the side on my MiSters. The first game that I've actually tried to beat from start to finish, and that is because it is a very short title that'll only take you like 30 minutes if you know what you're doing, and I wanted to just see if I could see the credits of a Sega Saturn game. And I can tell you that if you're looking for one game that just works, that feels like playing a real Sega Saturn that you can see the credits of, this is the game you want to play. If I just played this and nothing else on the current Sega Saturn core, I would say that it would be one-to-one perfect to a console. Now, of course, there's other games that aren't going to work that well, but if you want one, here it is. And other games, the audio is just improved. Last time we took a look at this, the audio was slightly scratchy and slightly poppy. On this test, I ran the same audio through, and everything sounded incredible. And that's the fun part, is you can in real time test these cores out and see what's going on. Now, some things, for the life of me, I can't get to work even though other people say that they do. Like Panzer Dragoon 2, you have to mash start, and maybe my start mashing just isn't at the right cadence, something that we're trying to find. But some people have luck running this game. I have absolutely no luck. It freezes every single time I try it, so hey, results may vary. But what results might not vary on is the fact that Quake, which also runs on the Power Slave engine that I showed you before, is also working on MiSter. This didn't used to work before, but some core updates got it going, and it plays spectacularly. And because we're doing this as a long form video, you get one more chance to listen to the audio, so enjoy it. I think I've hammered my point home at this time in the video that the audio is just that much better, but there's still some interesting things going on. Batsugan here, another multiple viewer request for a test, is running on the core, but you're going to see some interesting things happening. Don't forget that Sega Saturn has 2 CPUs and 2 VDPs, VDP 1 and 2. Each of those chips is responsible for handling a different subset of the graphics. And on Batsugan here, even though that colored checkerboard pattern is quite pretty to look at, that certainly isn't in the original game. And this is probably down to the fact that something is not coded together in one of the VDPs. Whatever's handling the background layer seems to not be functioning on this game. But the sprite layer, your player ship, and the different things you're fighting, they are appearing as normal. So it seems like it's just a missing feature. It could be an issue in the code, or it could be that one of the instruction sets for one of the VDPs is not yet complete, because all of those chips have different instruction sets, different functions they can handle, and if one of them is just not coded in, well, it's either not going to appear whatsoever, or it's going to appear with issues. Another game, big viewer request, Battle Garega. I don't know if I ever pronounced that right, so leave me a comment down below and tell me if you thought I did a good enough job. Has the exact same issue as the previous game we showed you, and that is not at all surprising because they basically run on a lot of the same engine, for lack of a better term. So seeing errors in one game is making sense seeing errors in the other game. But it does work, it's running at full speed, and I'm hoping with the next update some of these issues are missing, because that's the fun part about playing these games and showing you real-time updates. You get to see what the current status is even if you don't want to test it, and we get to see how these cores get made, because I love the iterative process of the entire thing. Now, a game that does seem to be working really well, but unfortunately MiSter can't make the game any more fun, that is on the developers, is Sonic R. There is very little to no audio in this game at its current iteration, but it's running exactly like you would expect Sonic R to run, which is to say completely janky. But it is a good example of the polygons on Saturn. Well, honestly, they're more quads. Polygon's just the standard term we would use, but it just looks right. It's playing how it should, and all of the 3D rendering on the screen seems to be close to what a real Saturn would do. Like I said, it's a bummer that the Sega Saturn can't improve the actual gameplay of games, but as a visual example of where the core currently is, at least in some 3D games, I think it's a prime example of how far this core has come along, especially with SRG320's situation. It is spectacular. He is able to update this as frequently as he has been lately, and if you want to support him, I left his Patreon link down below as well, because I'm sure he would appreciate your support, because all the core makers working on these things dedicate a lot of time and energy to them, and it is just an absolute blast to see all the iterative processes. Now, a game that more people than anybody else asked me to test, and I was actually surprised I hadn't tested it, I had to go look at my old notes and see, was Sonic 3D Blast. One of the big things with the core improvements is that most FMV cutscenes now play. It used to be that you'd have to mash start through most of them, but it seems like now 90% of them do not freeze the core. And that's a great thing, because it was always a pain to deal with earlier. But again, another game that has perfect audio, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll come back and talk about more tests. If that doesn't sound like a Sega Saturn, I don't know what does. But one game that is now functioning that did not work for me on previous cores is Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. I did not test Shadows over Mystara, so if you want to see that in the next video, leave me a comment down below. But this, while has no audio whatsoever, plays exactly like I would expect it to, and I do own this game on an original Capcom CPS2 board, and I also have it on my CPS2 multi. I've played this a lot. It's an excellent beat 'em up game, and what's happening here on Saturn feels one-to-one identical as to what I would expect it to play as if I was playing the arcade original, outside of the fact that it's just playing mute. Some games are just not going to have any audio whatsoever. Now this is a Japanese version, and for some reason people keep leaving comments saying they're getting an error message saying this disc is unsuitable for your console. There is no automatic region changing in the Sega Saturn core. You just gotta do it from the menu yourself. Lunar Silver Star Story, it's a lot of S's in a row but I got it right, was another gigantic request from viewers wanting to know if it's running on Saturn, and while I didn't play a ton of the game, I will say the FMV works perfectly fine, and this is the English version, and it is functioning. You'll see that there's a little bit of a weird color thing going on in that text box, but this game is playing. It does have some audio, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine outside of those odd purple and blue colorations in the text, and this game does like to launch FMV cutscenes with voiceovers, and a lot of times in previous cores things like that might cause the core to hang, but I can say at least in this example it's going a lot further than it should, or technically could, I guess. Another game that I've noticed worked before but works better now is Nights into Dreams. It just seems to be running more fluidly and faster, closer to what the Sega Saturn would execute as far as a frame rate's concerned. And it's another great example of the 3D capabilities of the Sega Saturn, and it seems like this core is kind of really doing well in both aspects now. A lot of the 2D issues have been ironed out in some games, and they're starting to look and feel like exactly their counterparts on the Saturn would, and a lot of the 3D games seem to be working as well, and that's just so much fun. But Nights into Dreams, it's working really, really well on the current core. Now, one thing you need to remember about the development of these cores is sometimes updates can be regressive. That means something that was working better on a previous core might be broken on the new core. The previous update, Burning Rangers, was working 2 updates ago, and then SRG320 updated the core, and it stopped working for me entirely. I can say that we're back to the same status, which is this game is working, and you can actually get ever so slightly further into it. There is definitely some graphical things missing here. I'm sure that's down to VDP1 and VDP2, but I could never turn this corner before. The game would freeze before the camera would move, but now you actually get here, and you're going to see the game try to execute the next part. This isn't engine, but you are getting a little bit of this in-engine cutscene until it changes camera angles right here in just a moment, and then the game freezes. So you're not getting too much further, but it went from working to not working to working and slightly better. One game that people have had different results with is Radiant Silvergun. I cannot get the game to stop freezing the minute I get control of the ship, but a few people have said they've gotten like 30-40 seconds into the first level before it freezes, and no one's really quite sure why we're getting different results. It could just be down to the individual files we're using. Everyone's on the same BIOS, so we know that is not an issue. But that's part of testing, and I actually think it's kind of fun to find out what is happening with your system versus somebody else's, and talking to them about the results. Get involved in this. If you like MiSter, if you like these videos, definitely start testing. Now, Sonic Jam is one that I tested before about 2 months ago, and you could get into the 3D area, but now it's just running better. That's what I'm discovering with a lot of these new core updates, is that things that used to run and feel a little bit hitchy or low frame rate, now are feeling like they would on an original Saturn. Again, there are some graphical bits missing here on the ground, but it has music, it has sound, and it's working like I would expect it to. And that's just part and parcel of all these new core updates. You can see in real time how things are improving. People asked me to test this game. I already did, but apparently some people missed it, so you got your request. Sonic Jam, the 3D area, is here, but one part that I haven't tested yet whatsoever is the actual 2D portions of Sonic Jam, the real game on that disc. There is some slight slowdown here and there, but there was some slight slowdown on Sonic Jam on Sega Saturn. I am not that well versed on that particular version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I usually just play it on the Genesis. So if anyone can leave me a comment down below and tell me if this slowdown looks like Sonic Jam, or if it might be an issue with the MiSter, or maybe a combination of both, because I'm just not that familiar with that, and I don't own an original disc for my Saturn. One game everyone wanted me to take a look at, Shining the Holy Ark, is just a game I can't seem to get to load. It will start playing and then it stops. You're going to find that for some of the games that don't work, they'll either just show this licensing screen and nothing else, a black screen afterwards, or in this instance you get a now loading screen. but that's as far as it's going to go. If things aren't loading in the appropriate time frame, if you know the game, then chances are they're not loading whatsoever. But something that does work is this game. It's got a Japanese title. I'm going to call it Shinobi. It's part of it. The cutscenes in the beginning of this game are absolutely hilarious and spectacular. If you've never played this game, you 100% owe it to yourself to do so. It's just not quite ready on MiSter yet. Some people have been getting some graphics, some people haven't, but once it says now loading, what I've encountered is just that you're going to see that player bar slightly on the screen, and nothing else is going to happen. But on the improvement front, Darius Gaiden has some excellent music as well, and it sounds even better than it did before. So I'm going to let you guys have one last listen to the music, because like I said, the main takeaway of these updates is that the audio is just so much better in spots. Go ahead and listen, I'll be right back again. So yeah, that's the current status of the Sega Saturn core as of the recording of this video. I did the voiceover for this on Monday. It is now Thursday, and the speed at which SRG320 has been updating the core, there could be a new version out by the time this video comes out, but I'll continue to test it if you guys want to watch it. And leave me a comment down below and tell me what set of games you want me to test next, because I love testing what you guys want to see. Short of that, I left the Shinobi cutscene up after the credits because it's hilarious. Enjoy that, but I will see you guys next time. Sega Saturn's feeling great. Bye-bye.
何のことだ。